all took the time. Assume that you're to blame. You think that you're insane. Won't you spare me? I know the breakdown. Everything is gonna shake now someday. I know the breakdown. Tell me again, am I awake now? Maybe you can find the reason that no one else is living this way. Yeah, living this way. Yeah.
Welcome to an overview of the WGP E-Orracle Autococker. For a full overview of the earlier mechanical version, please see my previous video. Let's get started. In the previous video, we discussed the initial release of the mechanical version of the WGP Oracle in mid-2002. It had significant improvements over earlier mechanical WGP autocockers like the STO and Black Magic, and the mechanical version of the WGP Oracle received many positive reviews from both average players and magazines at the time. However, by mid-2002, faster electronic markers were becoming increasingly popular as players sought higher rates of fire, and mechanical autocockers weren't as competitive as they once were. By May of 2002, Action Pursuit Games magazine was packed with advertisements for electronic markers like the ICD Bushmaster and the Smart Parts Impulse. There were several aftermarket kits available by mid-2002 to convert mechanical autocockers to electronic, with two of the more popular kits available being the Center Flag Uprising and the Race Gun Race Frame, which was also sold by ANS. These aftermarket trigger frame kits greatly increased the achievable rate of fire for autocockers, but the cost was substantial, with a retail price of about $400 for the kit alone, not counting the marker to install it on. At the PSP NPPL World Cup in October of 2002, Planet Eclipse released the E-Blade electronic trigger frame kit for autocockers. It also cost about $400, and the E-Blade and its variants would eventually become the most popular electronic trigger frame kit for autocockers. On October 31st, 2002, several weeks after Planet Eclipse released the E-Blade trigger frame, WGP announced that the E-Blade would be available for purchase pre-installed on their Oracle autococker. Shortly after the release of the E-Oracle, we start to see it showing up at trade shows and tournaments like the February 2003 NPPL event at Huntington Beach, being used by the Naughty Dogs, who ultimately took third place at the event behind Dynasty and the Tauntauns. With the exception of the trigger frame, the three-way, and a few minor changes late in production, all of the stock parts generally carry over from the mechanical version of the WGP Oracle to the new E-Oracle. Despite the similarities between them, the electronic E-Blade trigger frame completely changes the character of the marker and allows a much higher achievable rate of fire. Planet Eclipse started work on the E-Blade in September 2001, with Jack Wood designing the mechanics and Steve Monks designing the electronics and the software. They had three criteria for the E-Blade. It's durable, fast, and simple to use. If you're familiar with newer Planet Eclipse markers like the CS2 or the LV2, the board software is very similar. Holding the center button will turn the marker on, the top button toggles the breach sensor on and off, and holding the middle button will access the various board features like shot counters, battery level, and timers. Originally, standard E-Blade frames directly from Planet Eclipse were used. They were available in chrome or gloss black, had the standard plain E-Blade thick style trigger, and the Planet Eclipse logo on the cocking solenoid. Later E-Oracles and all the mini E-Oracles came with the Warblade trigger frame, which was a WGP branded E-Blade frame with some minor differences, including a built-in bottom line rail, the WGP logo on the cocking solenoid, and a different style trigger. Eventually the Warblade would be anodized to match the body on many E-Oracles, and even more milling would be featured on the trigger towards the end of production. One thing I like about the E-Blade trigger frame is that the screen seems to be a nice balance of a compact size, but still displays useful information. Some markers at the time, like the Smart Parts Impulse, just had a single LED light, which is a hassle, and some markers like the Diamatrix LCD display way more information than you really need. Overall, I think Planet Eclipse knocked it out of the park with their design of the E-Blade, and WGP made an excellent choice in deciding to sell their markers with the E-Blade installed. I've owned autocockers with other electronic trigger frames like the Center Flag Uprising, which I suspect WGP also considered, but the Uprising frame just doesn't feel as well built, adjustable, or as user-friendly as the E-Blade does. That's not to say the E-Blade is without any flaws though. My biggest complaint is that the E-Blade absolutely eats 9-volt batteries. Realistically, I only expect to get a single full day of use from a 9-volt. I also think the cocking solenoid has some weaknesses. Overall it performs well, but it can be prone to leaks if the LPR is set too high, and the solenoid is somewhat exposed to damage since the housing isn't enclosed at the bottom, and the routing of the wire to the board isn't covered. Planet Eclipse even featured the WGP E-Oracle on some of their advertising for the E-Blade, pictured here being shot by the Naughty Dogs, stating the E-Blade was designed to simply retrofit on any cocker. The Eclipse blade frame is easy to install, with comprehensive instructions included. It should also be noted that Planet Eclipse didn't just make parts for other companies like WGP. At the same time WGP was selling the E-Oracle, Planet Eclipse was manufacturing and selling their own line of high-end E-bladed autocockers, featuring bodies milled from WGP blanks, and which had some similarities at the time to the E-Oracle, but also had additional upgrades like a shortened and lightened bolt, a lighter back block, and some internal upgrades. Besides the milling, the body used for the Oracle was very similar to the earlier WGP Black Magic and WGP STO. The valve chamber was the larger 2000 plus size, and the valve was the 9/16 size, but was now stainless instead of brass. The stock feed neck wasn't clamping, but it was threaded, so most players replaced it with a clamping feed neck. A bottom line ASA wasn't originally included from the factory either, but later in production they came with the cage style on-off. Initially, all E-Oracles were full-size bodies, but a mini-sized E-Oracle was released later in production. The low-pressure regulator on the Oracle was named the Tickler by WGP, and it was about half the size of the older Sledgehammer LPR used on the Black Magic and STO autocockers. Plus, it could easily be adjusted externally by hand, which was a huge improvement. There were two slightly different styles of adjustment knobs used by WGP on the Tickler throughout the Oracle's production run, with the later version also seeing use on the Carnivore and Jeff Orr autocockers. In my experience, the Tickler LPR is extremely reliable, easily keeps up with a high rate of fire, and is fairly simple to rebuild. The stock RAM for the E-Oracle was the same STO RAM that had been in use by WGP for several years. Players frequently replaced the RAM with higher performance aftermarket versions, but the stock RAM is reliable, rebuildable, and cycles at a pretty decent rate of fire. Initially, the bolt on the E-Oracle carried over from the mechanical Oracle. The bolt had a Delrin tip without O-rings, and the back half of the bolt was metal. The bolt fits the marker well and works great, but the downside was it was quite heavy. The additional weight wasn't as noticeable in a slower cycling mechanical marker, but with the higher rates of fire on the E-Oracle, it noticeably impacts the smoothness of the marker. Later in production, all the mini E-Oracles came with a new bolt that was 100% Delrin, which resulted in a weight reduction on the bolt from 64 grams down to 44 grams. The weight reduction on the bolt meant much less mass was moving for each shot and results in a much smoother marker. Initially, the stock barrel was an aluminum 14-inch first-generation WGP caner with a 689 back. A full kit could be purchased from WGP with tips ranging from 10 inches to 14 inches and back sizes ranging from 684 to 691. The first-generation kits were offered in multiple colors, but gloss black and matte clear seemed to be the most common. Later mini E-Oracles were also sold with a 14-inch barrel and a 689 back, but this time it was a new second-generation caner barrel, which is most often associated with the Carnivore. The backs were longer, and full kits had a slightly wider range of sizes, down to 682, and the tips went up to 16 inches. If you purchased a WGP Mini E-Oracle in 2004, this is what you would have received. The box has a nice outer sleeve with some artwork and shows the marker's serial number and color. Inside, you'd get a WGP branded barrel bag, 2 feed necks, one high-rise, one low-rise, with neither of them being clamping, the marker itself, a blank warranty card, a WGP user's manual, a Planet Eclipse E-Blade manual, and the barrel. E-Oracles were extremely expensive, and by early 2003 we start to see them advertised for about $1,400, while the regular mechanical Oracle was advertised around $950. If we adjust for inflation, the cost of an E-Oracle today would be about $2,500 new. It's worth noting that the E-Oracle is just part of WGP's overall lineup, which includes other great markers from WGP like the VF Tactical, the limited edition Black Magics, the Outcast, and the Nightcast, which also featured an electronic Warblade trigger frame. With the Oracle being WGP's flagship marker, we see it being marketed and featured prominently on the cover of numerous publications throughout 2003 and 2004. This includes the cover of Paintball Games International in April of 2003, being shot by a member of the Naughty Dogs, and on the April-May 2004 cover of Paintball magazine being modeled by Bud Orr's son, Jeff Orr. There were a variety of articles at the time, like this one featured in the August 2003 edition of Action Pursuit Games. As I've said before, I don't think I've read any Paintball magazine articles about a marker that had anything overly critical to say, and for the most part, they're glorified sales pitches packed with sometimes questionable statements like, legendary closed bolt accuracy. The articles in most publications do contain some useful technical information, like details on the electronics or specs on the marker. This article claims the E-Oracle will shoot about 19 balls per second, which if all the components are in top working condition and it's finely tuned, I could certainly believe. Personally, I normally just run my E-Blade Autocockers on the factory fast setting, which isn't the fastest they can possibly shoot, but it works reliably.
Definitely taking advantage on this field, making the moves, getting into the head of the zipper.
Both these teams are super aggressive, folks. It's hard to tell how this matchup's going to lead, and this is definitely as much.
This article from the March 2003 edition of Paintball 2 Extremes featured Bud Orr with his personal E-Oracle and showered the marker with praise, saying, "The Oracle's combination of a luscious flowing milled body and beautiful anodizing have created one of the best looking autocockers ever produced." They continued with, quote, "The Oracle E-Class is easily capable of keeping up with the speed of any electronic paint gun." All good things must come to an end, and paintball in the early 2000s was changing rapidly as companies competed in an arms race for faster and faster markers. In late 2004, WGP released their new flagship marker and successor to the E-Oracle, the Carnivore. With the new Carnivore on the market, the E-Oracle was discontinued, and for a while they were sold side by side with the E-Oracle heavily discounted, until the remaining stock of Oracles were sold off. There were a few thousand E-Oracles produced, so if you're looking to buy one, they do pop up occasionally on eBay, Facebook, or mcarterbrown.com. At this point, they're all at least over 20 years old, and the O-rings do eventually turn into mush, so if it hasn't had a recent rebuild, it'll need one before it's ready for the field. Rebuilding one isn't overly difficult, but it does take some time and patience. Parts can be found on AutocockerParts.com, and mcarterbrown.com, which is an old-style internet forum, is packed with knowledgeable members willing to offer advice and information to help you rebuild it. I do have a Planet Eclipse CS2 that I put into my gear bag when I go to the field, and it's an objectively better marker in many ways compared to my E-Oracles. But to be honest, I play pretty casually, and I don't think I'd get any more eliminations using a marker that's a few ounces lighter or has break beam instead of reflective eyes. The E-Oracle shoots fast enough that I don't feel outgunned, but all the history and nostalgia helps keep paintball interesting and fun for me. I appreciate you taking the time to watch my video, and I hope you found it interesting and informative. Let me know in the comments what marker you'd like to see featured next. Thank you.